Yeah, and the clock is ticking down as always here at the place. Um, just waiting a few seconds. I used to play a nice song, but Facebook is lately so specific about what songs you can play for a few seconds, and then if it's not okay to them, although I do have the rights, they block, you know, my my podcast and all what have you not. So strange as that is. Anyhow, it's time to go live, and that means welcome here at the place with Jean every Tuesday at 12 o'clock Dallas time and 7 o'clock in Europe and everything that's in between. If this is the first time that you are here, then you might not know what this is. This is what we call the place for more connection and more answers every Tuesday, Facebook and YouTube Live. By the way, if you did not know exactly what it is and you are part of one of my coaching programs, you can always join this. This is a free coaching actually every Tuesday here. So without further ado, let's start with the topic of today. Welcome to the place. Here, episode 220 of Tell, the Everyday Life Lesson podcast. Don't forget to subscribe here, here at YouTube Live if you want to. It's a new channel, so it's growing, but we would like to see you there. And the good thing is that you can actually see all, thinking that you would like what I'm doing, you can see all my previous episodes of the place. Not all 220, because there was a time that I only did this on podcasts, and you can find us at the most common podcast channels like Apple and Spotify and what have you not. Anyhow, today we talk about, is there a formula to live life at the fullest? And this falls mainly under the life energies, mental and divine energy. There are 5 life energies, and these are, physical energy, we have mental energy, we have creative energy, manifestation energy, and divine energy. And if you have come to me here every week, then you have heard this over and over again, but I cannot say it more than enough, right? The 5 life energies were first presented in my best-selling book, Broken Silence, Living a Life of Passion and Purpose After Sexual Abuse. It's also the sponsor, by the way, of this podcast. All proceeds of the book go to a non-profit organization. So if you haven't had your copy yet, this would be a good time to get one from Amazon. It's a bestseller there already, but we can always have more readers, right? So anyhow, let's continue. Is there a formula how to live life to the fullest, right? Well, we all want to be happier, right? Strangely as that is, it's a super simple statement. It's only 6 words, right? But every person that I actually worked with in the, I don't know how many decades I'm coaching already, in the end, the question is always that they would like to answer is, how can I have a happier life, or how can I be more happy or content with what I'm doing? If I boil it down, and maybe that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but that's really what it comes down to. We all want to be happier in some sort of a way, right? But the question reminds me actually to also look for ways and see how I can contribute with my coaching and the things that I do to people's happier life, so to speak, right? And although everyone has a unique story, but there's one common desire that they all have, right? All my coaching clients, they have all a unique story. Everyone is unique, but there's maybe one thing that connects them all, or maybe even connects us all, is that we want to be happier in some sort of a way. Now, sometimes I did some podcast about this too, that happy is maybe a little bit overrated. It's all about happiness, but we're looking a little bit into, not that I am the know-it-all of the true happiness, but But we'll talk a little bit about what happiness is, what stops us from being happy, and is there maybe a formula for all of us to be more happy? Now, happiness can be fleeting, right? It is, once you have it, and then the next moment you don't, because something happened unexpected, and so on. And it appears to be out of reach for 1 second, and the next second you have it. And our society likes to define happiness in the terms of success or the things that you have, acquisition, and the capacity to improve ourselves or our current situation, specifically the status we're in, either our job, our income, our relationship, and so on and so on. And, to pursue that type of happiness is, I would say, even unstable. And it's a stressful way to continue to work with it. And if you add to that actually what social media is doing to us, where we actually, almost want to portray that we are always happy, which is not the case, and which is really okay to not always be happy, by the way. Overall, we want to be happy, but people would like to give them, as we have filters nowadays to make us look better. If you need that, I clearly don't need one, right? But I mean, just a joke. But it seems that on social media we would like to see even either we have big misery that we can share, or we show on social media how well we do, and so on and so on. So there is a big question, and there's some research done around it. How authentic are we still if we portray ourselves this way in social media? You can ask me the same thing, by the way, because this is going live on social media after all as well, right? So, but there is a different kind of happiness too than, just acquiring wealth and, improving our status. And that is, what I call the appreciation of things, and the appreciation of the things that you already have, and the appreciation of the achievements that you already have. And, in short, you can call that contentment. And being satisfied with who you are, where you are, and what you have, is the true meaning of being content. Now, some people, and in my sports coaching, I say the same thing, by the way, so it might be a little bit conflicting and contradictory at times here in this episode. But yeah, if you're too content with the achievements that you have, that might not be the best motivator to do more and get more, right? But everything, needs to be in balance. And if I talk to athletes, which I do, we constantly try to improve, of course, their results that they are after. So, but there needs to be also moments that you're content with what you did. If you cannot rest in that at moments, or celebrate even your successes or what you have, then there will never be that feeling of content and happiness accompanied with that either. And I know that I've been an athlete for most of my life. I can actually say for all of my life. And I had big successes, and sometimes, it was even after a big success that feelings of maybe not immediately depression, but feelings of lack of drive were not there anymore after big successes. So only getting the results of being a number one or getting on that podium is maybe not enough, right? I also say you need to be in love with the process, doing the things yourself. But, alongside with that is also being content with what you have achieved as well. My dad used to say, you need to strive for what you are after, but you need to be content with what you have. I think that's a wise thing to say and repeat here. I talk a lot about my dad in this podcast, not always in the most positive way, by the way, but there are many, if not more, positive things to say about him than the things that were not so good in it. Anyhow, most boys, same with me, I have a challenging relationship with our dad. Anyhow, let's continue with that. So, being content is actually that's more sustainable. And it's and you don't have to do so much for it, right? To find happiness in being more rich, find a better career, find maybe a better relationship. I mean, that is often not even attainable And being content is actually a thing that you can actually practice daily. We'll come back on that later, how to do that, right? In her recent blog, The Good Life, Nero Feliciano, and she's a therapist, and she's a writer. She actually has a nice blog and podcast as well. And she said there are four things that hold us back from having a content life. Um, hey, someone is, let me just add this to my broadcast here. Someone on Facebook, I don't know who it is, but says, hey, I'm following you from the camping tonight, which is cool. Cool, cool, cool. So whoever said that, I hope you have a good time here at the camping and enjoying your summer break as well. And by the way, guys, if you want to join me on my Zoom and talk to me in the after party about this topic and other things, you're still welcome to do that. Just drop me a message as well, and I will hook you up. But anyhow, Nino Feliciano, like I said, she's a therapist, she's a therapist, and she also has a nice podcast, quite often in the news as well. And she said there are actually four things that holds most people back from having a content life. And content life in this case could be, be equated with a happy life. Yeah. So people that compare what they do with what others do, compare what they have with what others have, compare their relationship with other people's relationship, compare their career with other people's career, compare their achievement. I think you get the message already, right? Compare their achievement with other people's achievement. Actually they tend to have be less content. They definitely not so content, and they tend to be less happy than other people who don't do that. Right? There is a saying, and that goes. So if I say it not quite as it is, but comparing steals joy. Is or comparison is the thief of joy. I don't know who said it, but it could not have been said better. And anyhow, Nero actually also quoted that same quote in her blog about this thing. Other people who, most of the time don't take responsibility for the situations that they are in and don't immediately feel insulted, because I don't know what you guys been through, and there are many things that happen to you that is outside of what you caused, but you could still take responsibility of how you react to some things, right? I've talked about this many times, right? So still people, although it's maybe a situation that you didn't ask for, it's even outside your fault, the way you react to a situation is always within your responsibility. And people have a hard time to do that. And I can say that with experience, by the way. I say that in an area where that's not always so easy to do that. So I try to say this with the utmost respect, because as you know, I work quite a bit with people who've been through quite a bit of ordeals in their life. And the things that happen to them often in their childhood. So that's not their fault. And I know that, because I often blame myself for the things that happened to me in my past, and there's no way that I could have done with it. But my thoughts, my mind sometimes go back to that place where I think that it was my fault anyhow. So that's a different thing. But if you put the fault, that's a slightly different thing. But if you think, if I just only say but I can do anything about it, because it's actually, so if I turn this around and saying, hey, it was my uncle abused me, what can I do about it? Now that abuse, I cannot do anything about it anymore, but I can still try to do something about coping with it. So that is what it is, and that's for anything in your life. Anything in your life is a situation that you're in. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you have to recognize and be deadly honest to yourself. Are you a person that actually secretly still blaming other people? And it could go, from really small things to really bad things. There are people who blaming entirely group of people for the misery that they're in. There are people who saying, I am unemployed because we have too many immigrants. That type of things. There are, you could blame anything But the truth of the matter is that most of the time, if not all the time, we can take responsibility of the situation that we are in. So people who are in that blaming game, and sometimes it's not that obvious that you are, tend to be actually extremely unhappy with the fusion, with the situation that you're in. One of the things that I actually build in my own coaching model is how to accept the situations that you're in first before you actually can do something about it. And sometimes it's just accepting the story that you have been through. Like in my case, it took me a while to simply accept the story that I am an abused child, but I cannot blame that story for the things that are going on in my life. It doesn't mean that you have to put it away and say, oh, it didn't happen. That's a whole different thing. But accepting the story as it is sometimes a really great first step to do this. Instead of asking, hey, why does this happen to me? Why I'm experiencing this, and so on and so on. Why me and not other people? I understand. I had these questions too, but most of the time these questions cannot even be answered, and actually it's pretty useless to have them. But if you have them, then you know that you fall in this category, and there's something maybe we need to talk about. Does that make sense? And then last but not least, according to Nero Feliciano, of the four things that C mentioned that makes people actually extremely discontent, is that there is this nowadays, this constantly distraction, and mostly because of the technology that we have around us. And I'm not different than anyone else, by the way, but I am very quickly distracted. Nowadays, it almost sounds like it almost sounds like hip to say that we have some sort of a disorder like ADHD, to say, okay, I cannot concentrate, I'm highly distracted. Now, I know I am very quickly distracted myself, but it's not a good thing. So we should try to build in things. And if you have suffering from that disorder, there are therapies and there are medication to do that. But for most people, distraction is just the technology and maybe other things that are around us. And that in itself, and it took me a while to really understand what it does to us if we're constantly distracted. You have to think about it, that our mind then constantly need to focus on other things. And our mind is actually an efficiency machine. It doesn't like that at all. So it gets tired of doing that and consuming a lot more energy than it actually needs. And the brain is already one of the strongest consuming organs in our body, if not the biggest one. So by doing that, by this distraction, we actually consume more energy than actually is required, which actually makes us less happy. And it causes concentration problems at all. And I know it. If I accidentally open Facebook and I see these reels coming by, before I know, I'm looking 20 minutes at reels. Think about this. About a year ago, I didn't even know what a reel was, and now I sometimes do this. But your mind switches from one topic to the other. It goes really fast, and research actually shows that. That quick mind switching, as is this called, and flipping, so that creates low levels of anxiety and decreases productivity tremendously. So research start to show this. So it's just a warning, and I feel like a broken record if I talk about technology, and people might think that I don't like technology. I do like technology, and I have been on the wrong side with technology many times myself at a dinner table when I look at my phone and I shouldn't. So I don't think I'm better than anyone else in this perspective. I'm just saying that these things that feels so futile and not important, by watching their phone constantly and looking at these reels, yes. And so let's not do that, right? Someone wrote to me, super cool topic. Let me just bring that in here, so you can see it yourself, right? A lot of people do that for fun, self-diagnosing ADHD, and I know some people actually really have that. And that's no joke, by the way. When you have that. So before you do that to yourself, and I sometimes do that too because I think I'm highly quickly distracting as well. But this topic is that's one thing, but the topic that I'm talking about is something that we all start to feel. And what we did not know is that that quick mind switching, that causes already low level of anxiety, and it definitely decreases productivity and even weariness. So be careful with that. So according to um, Nori Feliciano, I said her name a few times already. Those are four things why people are less content. Now, happiness, according to an author who wrote the book The How of Happiness, definitely worthwhile reading. It's a little bit while ago since that book was published, but it's definitely worthwhile reading. And she actually writes about the two things that you need to be happy. One is the hedonic goals, or hedonic goals, is depend how you pronounce it. That is all about the look for increasing pleasure and decreasing pain. If we have too much pain, it's very hard to be happy. If we have no pleasure, it's also very hard to be happy. If you only look for pleasure, by the way, that's another story. I've been there as well with this podcast as well. But that is one way people define happiness, and you need to look into those areas. What are the things in your life that causes pain? Doesn't always have to be physical pain, and of course you need to try to decrease that if it's possible. At the same time, if you have never pleasure in your life, that is definitely a thing that stops you from being happy as well. And then you have an even harder word to pronounce. That is the eudaimonic goals, and that has to do with increasing personal growth, finding meaning, and developing greater self-awareness. So around those five things, right? Increasing pleasure, pain, increasing personal growth, finding meaning, and developing greater self-awareness. You have that. I typically add another one to that, which would be into the demonic goals, and that is finding connection. So I would add that as the fourth one into those areas where typically happiness revolves around. Psychology, actually, if you think about it, and a lot of coaching too, but psychology specifically, for the longest time, is largely focused only on the things that go wrong with the human mind, right? And so behavioral therapy, all the therapies actually that you see have something to do with correcting what is wrong with the human mind. And that could be ADHD, which we say that's wrong because someone is too quickly distracted, and so has concentration problems. So if we give them behavioral therapy, that helps them to focus more. So a lot of these therapies in the past were only focused on, let's say, and it's a good thing that it's there. I'm not against that at all, by the way. But what is a little bit more modern from the last 10 years is what we call happiness psychology. In the beginning, when I saw that word, I kind of a little bit frowned my eyebrows and said, like, oh, what is that, happiness therapy? But it's a little bit more, other people call it positive psychology, which is not so nice because then the other one would be negative psychology. But it's a little bit more focused on creating more happiness and fulfillment in life, which actually plays right into where coaches often work in as well. So there's a huge overlap. Of course, the educational background and experience is sometimes different, but that's what it is. And one of those, let's say, old-fashioned psychologists is someone from Canada. It's David Dozois. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he wrote an article, although he's not a specialist in it, he wrote an article about positive psychology and living fully, living life to the full or living fully. So he points out a couple of things that I thought were interesting and comes down to maybe the formula to live a life to the fullest, right? First of all, He says you need to engage in happiness relevant activities. Now, that sounds like the obvious thing to do, but a lot of people engage themselves in things that has to do with status. Find a better house, find a better job, find a better career, find more money, and so on and so on. So if you just look at your calendar or your schedule on a day-to-day basis, and you would mark, your activities that you have on your schedule. If you don't have anything on your schedule, we need to have a different talk, right? But most people have a pretty full schedule. Can you mark, and whether you put a smiley face to it, whether you put a little sun or a flower, a butterfly, whatever you think makes you happy, around that, next to that item that you need to do, if those are the things that are happiness related activities, right? So just don't do it now, or if you want to do it now, you can do it now. But it's a very simple way. And now with your emoticons, if you go to your electronic calendar, if you talk about your devices again, you could do that actually. What are the things that makes me happy? Now, I'm a dance instructor. Most of the time that I need to change, that makes me actually pretty happy. Yeah, it's just very simple. A lot of people, if they go to work, they say, oh man, I go to work. And you could easily ask them, if I would give you $1 million, would you still go to the job that you have today? Most people say no, actually. I probably would still teach dance. Actually, not probably. I very likely would still teach dance. Some of you, I won't ever teach again. That's just I'm just kidding, right? So engage in happiness relevant activities, and that and does that mean that everything that you need to do needs to be happiness relevant? No, of course not. Of course not. I'm just saying, and I don't know what the right mix is for you. I just say you need to at least have some, if not the majority of your activities, be happiness relevant activities. And that can be work, right? Does that make sense? It's an old-fashioned thinking that work is different than happiness. Okay, and then we need to, simplify our life. Research actually shows that people enjoy life more when they consume less. Isn't that? And I'm not talking only about eating, right? I'm talking mainly about buying stuff and owning stuff, and that's the goal that people have. And don't think that I don't have goals in my life where I would like to own something. We all have that to some extent. But remarkable is that research shows that people enjoy life more when they consume less. In other words, the more you have, the harder it becomes to savor life experiences. So it's something to think about. And I live in suburbia, so I see a lot of people with big cars and stuff like that, and sometimes it makes them happy. So I don't know where to draw that line, and for most people it's hard to draw the line, but it's good to think about. Number 3 is focus on others. That definitely I have mentioned many times. If you don't put your life in service of other people, then what is life all about? I've questioned that not only to the general public, but to myself as well. How can I serve people best with the things that I can do with my skills, right? And the greatest joy we may have often comes from spending hard-earned money or time on other people. Well, we have a tendency to be focused with accumulating money, specifically in the Western world. It will bring us, because we think that brings us happiness and stability, but it's actually not the case. Now, if you're poor, that's a different thing. I'm not talking about, the decision between being poor and not. I'm just saying a lot of us, specifically here in the US and Europe, we already beyond that level of poorness. And if you are below that level, then I feel sorry for you, obviously, and we need to help you. But that's not what I'm talking about. So the sense of fulfillment that arises from spending money on charitable causes or buying gifts for loved ones or carrying out random acts of kindness frequently has a great positive impact on the well-being. More than just in self-indulgent purchases, right? And that doesn't mean that you cannot buy anything for yourself ever, right? It just there is some balance in that, and I'm the first one to admit that I can improve in that area as well, right? Research has shown that even in toddlers' life, I thought that was an interesting thing to read actually, that children who share their sweets and their gifts and what have they not are happier than those who keep it for themselves, right? So we have always tried to stimulate that with our kids to share what they have with other people. I'm not sure. You have to ask them themselves if we were successful in that. So, passionate, I definitely believe in that we all need to live a passionate life, but it also needs to be so harmoniously. And what I mean with that, and what David Dozois means with that, is you can also go too far in your passionate life, so focused on one thing, and that could give you some happiness, but sometimes, you miss out on other things too. It's hard to do that in a harmonious way, because sometimes you say, you need to be super passionate about one thing to achieve the goals that you want to have, specifically in business and in the world of sports. We see that. I've definitely been one of those myself, where I've got so single focus on one thing, and people say you're very passionate in things. Yeah, that's true, but it came maybe with a little bit of cost too, and we can talk about that too, and that's what I talk about harmoniously. But the truth of the matter is, and what I talk about is, be passionate. Try to find out where your passion is. Do you always have to make your profession of that, like I did with dancing? No, of course not. Right, I know a ton of people who just, as a hobby, they have a guitar playing, and it gives them a lot of passion, and then it's an offset of other things that they feel they need to do in life, that maybe is, brings a little bit less happiness, or is less happiness acted. How do you call it? Action. How did I say that in the beginning? As maybe less happiness relevant activities. That's what I wanted to say, right? So yeah, find your passion. If you don't know what it is, if you don't know what really motivates you in life, there are really good programs to do that. And this is not a self-commercial, but it is definitely one of the fields that I work in, is to help people to find their passion and maybe even their purpose, right? And then I don't know, forgot what point we were on. Yeah, bring humor in your life, of course. We all need to laugh. There's no question about it. The research definitely shows that laughing is really good for and contribute to your happiness. But there is something weird with humor. There are actually, in psychology, we talk about 4 types of humor, and actually I'm only talking about 2 of them that is helping you, and that is affiliative and self-enhancing humor. We also have the other humor, right, where it's maybe a little bit more aggressive and self-destructive humor. And that is when you put yourself down constantly. And if you do that in front of a group, it might be funny for other people, but in the end of the day, it will not be so good for yourself. Or if you make humor on behalf of other people, if you laugh on behalf of other people, that in the end of the day, it might be funny in the group that you're talking to, or whether it's, you talk in a denigrating way about the other sexes, or whether you talk about other people, you know try not to do that. Actually, research is quite extensive on this part, on those 4 type of humor. Humor is really good, but only the 2, where it's affiliative, which means it's actually, where you actually communicate with each other and have fun and try to make that a little bit more comical. And self-enhancing humor is self-destructive humor, could be sometimes a little bit not so good. Now, I think I'm really good at it, because I praise myself constantly when I'm in front of the classroom. So I think I'm really good there. That's why I'm such a happy person. Anyhow, let's move on to the next thing, and that's called thinking with evidence. I spent actually, I think it was last week, about this topic alone, is that we don't, and that has something to do with our false belief and what we think is right. We need to be open to that. So we need to be what we call cognitive flexible. Let's not get stuck in one type of thinking, and let's be very open if we come across things that actually proves us wrong. it's really good. It actually makes you super happy if you can do that. If you get stuck in a certain type of thinking, on the long run, actually, that makes you not so happy because you become less and less flexible in your thinking. So we call it thinking with evidence. At least David Douzois calls that thinking with evidence. I like that. So if you have some beliefs of some trail of thoughts, at times challenge your thoughts by talking to people that you don't agree with. I mean, I'm doing a small repeat of last week's episode, or read stuff that maybe is not immediately, in your line of thinking, and that helps you actually to become more flexible in your thinking. Self-compassion, yeah. Then don't overdo it, right? But it's definitely a good thing. Also here, most of these topics that are here, I spent whole podcasts on this thing. Yeah, it's good to have self-compassion, but it needs to be in balance. Remember, your life needs to be in service of other people, but at the same time, you need to be your best buddy too. Don't beat yourself up constantly by thinking that you're not enough, or and so on and so on. And I definitely had my periods of sadness and stuff like that. And my therapist, yes, I work with one too, said if I and sometimes other people need to mention to your accomplishments and the things that you do in the world to really see, hey, there is a place for me. So, but you need to do that to yourself too. So self-compassion is a good thing, and not always easy, right? Um, Another viewer actually, Matthew. Hey, Matthew, thank you for this topic. Matthew said this is a great subject. Thank you for seeing my show here. Being present, focused, and mindful. That is definitely. I'm a mindfulness coach myself, and and it's one of the most successful thing actually you can take a coach for, and that is, if you don't know how to do that, to practice present and mindfulness. And that is different than just only thinking about the power of now. I mean, I debunked that book completely, although I was a big adept of the power of now, but there's a lot of rubbish in there too. It's, I'm sorry to say that, Mr. Eckhart Tolle, I have admiration for you bringing that book out, but it is time to do an updated version of that, right? Because your past does matter for your present, and what comes in the future does matter for what you do today. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to be present focused, right? So at the time when The Power of Now was published, I was a big fan of it. I still am to some extent, but it needs to be updated. It's about probably 30 years ago already when that book came to bear. So today's most successful forms of coaching is to help clients to accept their negative thoughts and get deeper understanding of themselves by utilizing mindfulness techniques. So meditation is part of mindfulness. Meditation is not mindfulness, right? There are other things. A better acceptance of who we are, and the best way to conduct our life results from having that insight, is that in the end, there is only now, which is true, right? But we do things in the light of the present, and you need to see the present of the future. Sorry, you need to see the present in the light of the future. But both these things can be heavily, affecting each other. If I don't have any faith or belief in the future, and we call that hope, that affects how I feel today. And sometimes because of trauma or other things that we have been through, like myself with an abuse, our past can still cast such a big shadow over today. So we need to look at those things too, right? Mindfulness helps with that. Okay, and then of course things that I love to talk about, and it is being uncomfortable and taking risk, right? Every time you take a risk or make a decision that you make feel awkward or uncomfortable is actually a really good thing. In short, you actually face your fear. I don't know who said it, but you need to just do, if you do once a day, but let's say once a week, do one thing that makes you feel uncomfortable, you actually will progress a lot, but it actually in the end makes you happier because most of the things that we fear are not so big after all at all. So that's a good thing. Facing your fears may help you extend your horizons in a way you cannot even conceive. I definitely did more than one podcast on this, whether it's learning to speak in front of groups of people, and I definitely help people to do that, but this is such a great thing as a dance teacher, right? Only in the last, we call that a showcase, and that means that my colleagues and me, we dance with one of our students, and we do a little performance, a dance performance. We call that a showcase, and one of my students is a really big fear to do that in front of the audience, and she did it anyhow. So the time ramping up to that was full of doubts, and shall I do it, and I'm not going to do it, and but in the end she did it anyhow, and she said, wow, this dance lesson was so much more than a dance lesson. And that's not one student, my colleagues will testify to the same thing. It's a tremendous thing. It feels like something simple, but I ask you to do it yourself. If you've never done a dance performance and suddenly you have to do that for a group of 100, 200, 300 people, it changes you, and it doesn't have to be big. You don't immediately have to go here to the big football stadium and do a speech or to the nation or something. It's just that small, right? Do something that helps you. So being uncomfortable and taking risk is definitely, and you can do it in moderate ways, and the more experienced you are, you take on bigger things as well. My first podcast was, pretty scary, I must say, but over time it becomes more and more better. And you become better, and it makes you happier, by the way, and it actually is true. And you see more new possibilities in life as well. So that definitely contribute to your overall contentness and happiness, to use this word. And then last but definitely not least is be connected. Right, there are people who say, "No, I'm a solo artist. I like to be on my own." No one likes to be really on their own. There are times that you like to be on your own, and there are definitely people who like to be more by themselves than other people. Extreme introverts, by the way, the word introvert is also used too loosely nowadays, by the way, because there's only less than 10% of the world population is truly an introvert. The rest are all, to some extent, extrovert, and I might be one of the extreme extroverts. So for extroverted people, it's a little bit easier to be connected. But that doesn't mean that the connections that I make are always meaningful. Right, so people who are easily make connections, they maybe need to, think a little bit how they can make their connections deep and profound. Now, having said that, does every connection needs to be deep and profound? Not at all. Just a simple talk in the elevator and asking someone how they are when you see them, or if you like something, that the person is, give them a compliment, or just say hello, good afternoon, or something. Seems to be something that is almost going away now. And if you do it, in the way that you mean it, and that already actually is proven, by the way, to be much betterment for you. If you just go in the store, you pretend that you don't see anyone, but if you just, say hello. Now, I am so extroverted. My daughter, actually, she is quite an introvert. I mean, she's not annoyed by it, but she sometimes admires it. But because she says that, her mother is, by the way, the same thing, that you just walk and you talk about to everyone that you see. Is it? Well, yeah, that is kind of true, right? Maybe that's a little bit too much, by the way. But like I said, people like me, sometimes can come across a little bit as aloof, right? So those people need to maybe look into, can I maybe deepen those things? And the people who are not at all like me, they might think about, maybe making connection is not that difficult at all. I can say hello and hi to someone in an elevator or something like that. And if not, there are definitely, again, good programs for that to do that. So those are all the things that I had to say to you. And those are pretty universal. Happiness is personal, but, those things are pretty universal, and we all look for some sort of a shortcut to happiness. Like recent Mega Million lottery here in the U.S. went over $1 billion. Seriously, the jackpot would be over $1 billion. Now, a lot of people, including myself, I would think that I would be so happy if I would win that. But if I don't change any of the things that I mentioned before, I don't think it really matters. I might be happy for a few weeks or a few months because of all the money that I suddenly have. But if I don't apply all these things that I just mentioned, then it's probably futile and doesn't mean anything. I'm just a really wealthy, not so happy person, right? So becoming happy is a constant thing, right? There's no shortcut to it, right? It takes time, and it takes even work, and to apply the things that I do, and take them one at a time. Talk maybe to a coach like me. Again, it's not a commercial, or maybe it is a little bit, right? And sometimes we need to simplify our life a little bit. Maybe we need to look a little bit more in how we make our connections that we have. Maybe we need to, go to our schedule and say, hey, what are the things that I do on a daily basis? And can I put a little smiley face or a little, flower next to all the things that I think actually these are the things that I do happy. And if 80% of the things that I do that doesn't make me happy, maybe we need to rethink our life, right? And if the people around us, and you put just the names around you, and you could do the same thing, are those the people actually that make me happy, or are they just in our life because I have to accept them? And doesn't mean that you immediately have to put them out of your life. Think about it. A relationship is going two ways. If you're not happy with your relationship, you can immediately break it, but you can also say, can I change it? Remember, which comes down to, do I blame the situation I'm in to other people, or do I take responsibility to solve it? And to solve it is not always to start over again, which, by the way, is something that I always think that I should do. Like, I don't like it, let's throw it away, let's buy something new. That's not a good thing. I found it out the hard way. Doesn't immediately mean that goes away out of my way of thinking, out of my habits, because in the end of the day, guys, I've always said it, we always have to review our beliefs and our habits, because in the end of the day, that makes about who we are and how we live and how happy we are, right? So I want to close with a quote from David Douzois, who did this, who wrote this, a big part of what I said here. So it's not the years in your life, but it is the life in your years that matters most, right? It's not the years in your life, but it's the life in your years that matters most, all right? So this was Jean with another episode of The Place. I hope you liked what we said here. If you want to be next time at the after party in Zoom, don't forget to send me a message. But before you do that, right, find us on YouTube and subscribe for the channel. It definitely still needs to grow quite a bit. I know you always look at me here on Facebook Live, which I'm tremendously grateful for as well. So anyhow, having said that, I hope to see you back next week with another episode of The Place here at 12 o'clock. This was Shah, and today we talked about, is there a formula how to live life to the fullest? With that, I say bye-bye to you all.